Ernie Kenny said, "Boy, they're armed for bear over there. He don't know what I sent him into over there." That's the lion's den. No, they were great. This morning, did Ernie mention to you about the straw vote to be taken at supper tonight? Did he? I didn't know whether the word got to him or not because John and I were talking, or Bob and I, just before we went into that session. Okay, we just want to be sure that everybody was giving some thought to that little idea. Okie dokie, this afternoon's session, which will conclude at approximately 3 o'clock, I say approximately 30 seconds either way, is on understanding definitions. And we're going to try to hold to our subject. This morning I felt like at some points of the program we actually let it get away from us a little bit into how I teach certain things, and we started getting comments from the floor, and this is all very interesting, but if we start letting you tell us how you teach, all of a sudden we'll have 200 fellows telling us how I teach square through. One guy uses a card table, and one fellow uses a pool table, and one fellow uses a chair, and I use people, and So we're going to try to stay to the subject, and the subject is understanding the definitions. First of all, I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't know the gentleman behind me, but in case you don't, I would like to introduce to you my colleagues up here who are going to help us handle the program for the next hour and a half. Over here on my left, the fellow who kept getting picked on this morning on the stage, and I was sitting so close to him that I caught his disease. Jerry Haag from Texas and Wyoming. As he said, nothing's changed. I'm still getting picked on. Also with us is a friend from back in Massachusetts who made some nasty remarks about fat this morning, and we've had a little staff meeting about that. He will not be making any jokes about fat this afternoon. Don Beck. And I'm Frank Lane from Colorado. I think the first thing that we have to do this afternoon as we start our session is to instill in your minds the necessity for knowing definitions. If we don't think we have to know them, then we're wasting our time for the next hour and a half. Don and Jerry and I happen to think that actually callers only have a given number of tools to work with in our calling and in our teaching. And some of those tools are God-given. And some of them are things that we can develop with practice. Other things are things you have to sit down and learn and study and learn. And one of those are the definitions that we work with at any given program. Just a little background for some of our newer members. I hope you realize how lucky we are to have the CALLERLAB definitions that we have. Those things didn't just happen overnight. And they were not the figment of 4 or 5 callers' imaginations who went into a smoke-filled room one evening and came out the next morning and said, "Gang, here are the definitions we're going to work from." No, sir. Those definitions that we are using at the mainstream level, for instance, are the result of 13 drafts that took a period of 6.5 years to develop. And you say, why did it take so long? Because we got a bunch of nitpickers in this organization, and that's good. Because they'd find little flaws here and little flaws there, and we'd correct them. There's still some flaws we missed. But on the other hand, they're a doggone good set of definitions that we can work with. It's one of the most valuable tools that we've ever been blessed with, I think, in teaching square dancing. Until now, many of us have depended upon teaching square dancing by trying to remember how we were taught. And we've tried to remember in our mind's eye the definitions to certain things. If you've been doing that, let me beg of you to go and reinforce your knowledge by going back and checking and making sure you still are correct. That what you've been doing is still the correct way to do it. In other words, that you're using the words that the CALLERLAB definition sets out as being the correct definition. If you've ever played the game of starting something down at one end of a line and whispering in someone's ear and seeing what comes out the other end of the line after it's been passed along to 15 or 20 people, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't come out with any resemblance to what started over here. And that's what's happened a great deal sometimes to our teaching of square dance definitions and terms. We were doing this morning, and I asked for a few questions, and I got some interesting... How many of us in this room... How many of us, when we go to our classes or our clubs, carry with us in our briefcase or in our record case a set of CALLERLAB definitions. That's great. That's not terrific because there were some hands didn't go up. But it was great because there was a preponderance of them that did. How many of you have read those definitions in the last 20 minutes? That's what we're talking about. You got to constantly reinforce your knowledge of those definitions. You got to constantly reinforce it. The last 20 minutes is a bit of an exaggeration, but I had to get your attention. How many of you in teaching square dance classes have ever read a definition to your square dance class? This morning I asked that question, and I looked back and I saw Don's hand start to go up and then go down. And I asked him, and I'm going to ask him to do the same thing this afternoon because it's an interesting point. I said, why did you start to say yes and said no? He says, well, I don't read them. I said, neither do I. I memorize them. I learn them to where I can get up here and say them without reading them. But if I had to make a choice between quoting them incorrectly or reading them, I certainly would rather read them. I'd rather be accurate and read them than be guessing at them and do it off the top of my head. I'm going to ask Don if he will tell you a little thing that happened to him lately that I think is worth spending 2 or 3 minutes on. Don, would you tell him about your little experience in one of your class lately?
This is something that was rather embarrassing when it happened to me in class a few months ago. And I don't particularly enjoy sharing embarrassments, but I guess it's worth it here. When Frank embarrassed me saying it earlier today, I countered with another overweight comment, but we've agreed I wouldn't say anything about it. I really do hope it's not contagious, though. Anyway, I taught one of the more intricate, involved calls on our mainstream list to my beginners class. Walk around your left hand, lady. And because it was something that I didn't feel I had to look up before class and refresh how it went in my mind. And after the class, thankfully, very tactfully, one of our fledgling callers who happened to be a dancer in that group came up and said, I thought the definition says it's such and such. And I said, I'm not really positive. And I went and looked it up. And sure enough, I had taught it improperly. And I proceeded the following week when the class was there to reteach it correctly. But it's not a good idea to teach things wrongly in the first place. I guess the thing that embarrassed me, and is a good point, is that as well as you know, as much as you know, you think you know the combinations, the calls, the definitions, because you've been dancing them and calling them and instructing them for years. It doesn't hurt at all to go back and reread them, when you're preparing your class for that night. As trivial as walk around your left-hand lady. As I say, I recently blew it.
What did you do? I'm just curious.
What did I do? I had the heads past the... No. No. Basically, I told them that... Do we really have to do this? Basically, I told them it was the same thing as a do-si-do, except that you end up going back to your partner so you can do a seesaw or a what have you, pass by or such. The facing direction was improper.
Don't be bashful. 90% of them sitting out there teach it the same way.
Can I see a show of hands? How many of you... I've never seen so many people sit on their hands.
You ain't going to get no hands on that one.
Tell them the right way, Frank.
No, but seriously, those are... Don and we were just talking last night in planning our session, and, you take a simple thing like walk around your corner, and you think, I don't need to look at a definition for that. It helps. It helps, gang. Look at the definition for everything in that book when it comes time to teach. We're going to lay out a few more ground rules, and then we're going to turn it over to my colleagues here to start some presentations on. We've chosen about 9 or 10, depending on how much time we have, basics off of the mainstream list, or possibly we may even get to one off of the plus list. I wish we could, because there's one up there that worries me a great deal. So what we're going to do right now is lay a few ground rules and point out a few points that we think are worth thinking about for our session here the next hour, and also in your teaching experiences. When you are going to teach a basic, your first consideration is to study that basic to understand the intent of the definition. not just memorize the words like Mary had a little lamb. You got to read that definition trying to determine the intent of that definition. What is it trying to accomplish? Why did they choose to describe it this certain way? What are they trying to emphasize? What are they trying to avoid? All those things are in those words. They were done for a reason. You, over your period of time and developing experience as you go along, will learn to do a couple of things that are just invaluable, and that is this. You'll learn to develop the ability to spot the potential trouble spots of a given definition. Dancers are going to have certain things that they find difficult to understand by hearing the vocalizing of that definition or even seeing the printed word of that definition. You, with your experience, will learn to spot those to where you can help the dancer understand what the intent of that definition was. You will also learn to pick out the highlights of the definition, the 2 or 3 things about that definition that make it unique, the things the dancer must know to be able to execute it correctly. Facing directions. That's just one that hit my mind. Then we're going to go a little bit into techniques of when to use half-sashayed positions, when to use left-handed positions, how those do lend themselves to the type of calling that we have come to call DBD, dancing by definition. And we're not trying to encourage you to use way-out material, contrary to what some people seem to think. Dancing by definition does not mean you have to go out and call things from just almost impossible positions to prove your point. We made a little statement in one of our seminars lately with a group, and at that particular time we were talking about teaching, and one of the statements that I came up with was this: like any new approach or idea, and DBD is comparatively a new idea, we need to start slowly and to advance accordingly. Too much is like an overdose. It'll kill the whole idea. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is this: don't just show it and forget it. If you're going to show the definition and how it can be applied to your choreography, of how it does lend itself to offering variety, then use it in a position or in a formation or in a combination of moves that will emphasize the points that you made about the definition in your teaching. If you talked about ends and centers rather than right hands and left hands, point out in the use of it in your choreography, so that the dancer will not only have heard the correct usage of the figure, the turn, the definition, but will have learned to dance that thing, making his or herself think. I think sometimes we don't give these dancers enough credit. They don't want to be beaten the ground. They came for fun. They got to keep smiling. When they quit smiling, you're in trouble. But a lot of them can think and smile at the same time. Now, I know some we callers can't even walk and chew gum at the same time, but these dancers are a lot sharper sometimes. They can think and dance and smile all 3 at the same time. So don't underestimate their abilities. They can have a lot of fun knowing a lot about square dancing. At this time, like I say, we're going to take some of these basics. We're going to start definitions of basics, and we're going to start talking to you about them and explain some of the things that we think about them. We're going to encourage at a couple of points along the way some audience participation. We're going to try to be as democratic about that as we can. When you do come to say something, would you please walk to a floor mic, because the session is being taped, and it's hard to read lips on the tape. So if you do have something to say, walk to the mic, tell me who you are, what state you're from, and then say what you got to say, and then we'll get on with the show. Right about now, I think we'll talk about the fact that some basics lend themselves to different types of demonstration. Some you can teach merely by verbalizing. Some you have to get a square out there and demonstrate. Others lend themselves to graphic demonstrations like chalkboards, flip charts, this sort of thing. Don makes a great deal of use of chalkboards, blackboards, in his teaching, and I'd like him right now to give you a little presentation on 2 or 3 or so of the basics that he thinks lend themselves very well to this type of presentation. Don? You want to start over there? You want to work here for a while?
Leave it where it is, yeah. We'll start here for a while. The definitions that we have, and I remember when the revisions were being worked on and there was a lot of philosophy on the definitions as we wrote them. There are 2 philosophies. One is to put down the intent of what is meant by the call The other is to make it so that you can teach the call with it. And I think the prime factor we came out with is a method of ensuring that the intent of the call was passed along from generation to generation, so to speak, from year to year, caller to caller. Your responsibility, and Frank mentioned this, a lot of us have things in our mind what a call should be because that's the way we learned it. The reason we should now agree to change that feeling if necessary, if it disagrees with the definitions we all came up with, is because after much work we all decided that, the consensus is that if we have to have one definition, I guess it's got to be the one that those 15 people wanted rather than the one that I thought was correct. So we'll all convert over to that. Now when you pull out this document and you read the definition says it is this, your first job is to understand what is meant by that. Your second job when teaching a class is to get the dancers to understand what is meant by that and get them so that when you call it, they can physically respond to it and dance to it. That's not necessarily reading the exact words off of the definition. That's not a bad place to start, but everybody sort of learns in a different way. And if some of you learn by hearing the words, fine. If some of you, your students, learn by taking the definitions home and reading them, fine. Let those do that. If some of them will learn much better by seeing two couples on the stage or up in front, or one couple, say, on a two-person move. Do the call there and demonstrate it before doing it. Fine, do that. Some of them learn better by seeing pictures on the blackboard. There are some calls that relate to that lend themselves to being demonstrated on the blackboard. Not too many, but I'm going to show you a few that I use today and let you think about maybe that's a good way to do it. Again, it's a method of helping the dancer better understand what is intended by what they're supposed to do so that they accomplish what the definition says. The main thing that I use as one of my prime teaching principles is the first time people physically do the movement, they should do it right. When you do something, you learn to do it that way, and if you do it right the first time, you're going to learn it right. And if you do it wrong the first time, you're going to learn it wrong. You eventually may learn it right also, and you've got the conflict inside of the wrong plus the right. But what I try and do is anything within my power to get people to do it, to get their bodies to do it right the first time. I know before I was really clever enough to understand that, I used to give a rough explanation of what I wanted, call it, see what would happen, and say, I guess I missed getting this point across. You guys go back and you've got to pay attention to do this. And then I get them to do it right the second time, but not the first. Get them to do it right the first time. Use anything within your power to get them to do that. If it takes a demonstration, if it takes a chalkboard, by all means, it's okay to use a chalkboard. I had somebody come up to me after the first session we did and say, I've always thought of visual displays, but I said, my God, if another caller found out I was using a chalkboard, what would they say? He found out I was using one. He said, great, now I can use it too. You don't have to get permission to be a better teacher. It's really okay to do it on your own. But let me show you what I mean by some of the chalkboard ideas. One of the ones that I like to work with, you should have seen the show this morning. We didn't have the removable mic. I was running back and forth between the board and the gooseneck over there, and it took a long time. Anyway, circulate is a call that a lot of people have ideas to teach. Similar, they use the same pool table for teaching circulates that they do the square throughs. I like to think of, again, when we originally named some of our calls, some of them are named properly and they tell us what's going on and some weren't. And circulate is one of those calls that the English meaning of the word correlates reasonably closely with what the movement is. It tells people that there's a path that they have to circulate around, to move around on that path. And all we have to do is tell them that there is a path, identify for them where the path is, and ask them to move forward one position on that path. And I get them in an ocean wave so they can relate to what's going on. And then I draw something on the board that looks like this. And I tell them those are dancers facing the sides of the hall. Notice there's no facing direction on this. For those of you that can't see this far because the chalk isn't bright enough, dark enough, imagine it there anyway, okay? And as I was thinking this morning, if I had a class that was as large as this, our 3, 4, 5, 6 square classes don't spread back into the back of the hall quite this much. If I had larger classes like this on a regular basis, I'm sure I'd come up with a way of a paintbrush instead of a chalkboard. But for now, we'll live with this. And you tell the dancers that there is a path that you have to move around on. And first of all, let's talk about the ends of this line. There's a path that goes from here to here, around the end, from here to here, and around the end. And when you're asked to circulate on this path, I didn't mean to put an arrowhead there, you're supposed to walk forward one position along that path. And if you're this person and you're facing in, you walk forward till you get to that spot. If you're this person but you happen to be facing out, you walk forward around this path, facing back in on the other side. If you look at the definitions in the CALLERLAB definitions, that's effectively what it says. Locate the path and do it. But you can't read that to the dancers. You've got to identify the paths, and a blackboard is an excellent way of doing it. Centers similarly have a similar path that goes like this. Identify the path, walk forward one position on that path, that way or that way. Notice we aren't talking about left-handed waves or right-handed waves. We aren't talking about men or women. We're talking about identify your path. It's either on the inside or the outside, and move forward one position on it. We then tell them if we're going to do all at once, the centers and the ends at the same time, they'll hear the term all eight circulate. Look for your path, move on it. I eventually get them into two-faced lines, all heading in the same direction. Say all eight circulate, and tell them you notice the person next to you went the same way as you did at about the same time. If you had held hands with them, we have a name for it. It's called couples circulate. You're moving into it then. Eventually, quite a bit later, like 3 or 4 or 5 weeks later, when I get around to teaching split circulate, they've been doing this fine, I teach them that what we're going to do is split the square down the center. And I think it's a lot easier for them to see that split than it is to say, let's have the women hold their hands up. Nobody crosses along the wall between that's made where those women's hands are. There's a wall down the center. We're splitting it here. And there's a path that people must move around. And you stay on that path, staying on your side, going frontwards or backwards. I generally get into the point of telling them that if this person is facing in and this one's facing in, this one circulates to that spot. This one circulates to that spot. And there's a rule that covers this problem of moving along the same line, and that general rule is the rule of survival. Don't crash. And in order not to crash, we all use the same rule of pass right shoulders in the process. And I explained it's not done too often that way, but the rule covers that if anybody ever calls it, and I do on occasion just to remind them of it. Don't worry about it. Just move forward on your path. When we get into columns, we show the path of the columns. When we get into split columns, we split that down the center. And I tell them, again, it's very awkward in the center because it's crowded, but this is what the intent is if it's called. And the same thing with diamond circulates, there is a path, and ping pong circulates, there's a path. And we get them dancing this way and that on it. The main thing, though, is get them to visualize a path and get them to move forward one position on that path. The other thing I'm trying to emphasize is not every call lends itself to a blackboard, but when it is possible to make better understanding of the dancers, don't be afraid to use one. How do I get their attention? When I am teaching a class, and it's the tip where I'm planning to do some teaching or any kind of announcements and that sort of thing, typical of getting attention of any group, you use what's opposite to what's instinctive. If they're making noise, if you talk louder, they're going to make more noise. All you do is stand there and don't say a thing and look very impatient. And eventually one of them will notice and tell the person next to them to shut up. Eventually they're all quiet enough, if that's what you're looking for. Oh, okay. It does. It does, but I feel it's worth it. What I do is I get them up this tip. We're going to learn some new things. Let's have the heads star through, pass through, step to an ocean wave. Okay, and then I go up and draw it and make sure that if I've got waves facing the side of the hall, I draw the waves up here facing the side of the hall. And don't have the sides do it so the waves are facing one way. I want them to be able to relate to these spots so they can understand where they are. I'll have them in that position. I'll do it. I'll then have the ends circulate. Ends look at your path. I'm going to go around like this, have them circulate. I try and get them to correlate their minds, their bodies to the picture, paint a line on the floor, go with that. Is that what you meant? Okay. Next call that I think the blackboard lends itself to beautifully is a call called Cloverleaf. And trying to draw this large enough so you can see it and small enough so I can fit my picture in here. Just a typo. Okay. Again, I will get them in a completed double pass-through formation like this, and then have them look up at the board, and I'll say, drop hands and relax, but remember where you are. And show them on this next call, the leaders will separate from each other. The one on the right will go to the right in a big 360-degree arc in that fashion. The one on the left will go off to the left, away from them. Thank you, 270. This is an interesting point. This morning, and you wonder why dancers get confused. We were talking, and I noticed in the definition it very nicely said a three-quarter turn, parentheses, 270 degrees. And we figure some people understand three-quarters, and some understand 270 degrees, obviously better than I do. We were at lunch talking to somebody, and they say, I teach them about sort of being on the hands of a clock and turning 15 minutes, which sounds like a good concept, too. Most of the world is going over to base 10, our monetary system. We're trying to get into the metric system, which is base 10. And here we are expecting our dancers not only to know base 10 in some place, fractions in others for the three-quarters, base 360 when we're talking degrees, base 60 when we're talking minutes of the hands of a clock. No wonder we confuse them. But, again, maybe that's what they can relate to best. Anyway, on a 270-degree turn, the leader in each case, away from his partner, meeting this new person as a partner coming into the center. The trailer, in each case, follows single file behind them and around and started behind them, ends immediately behind them, tracing the same path on the floor. The definition, by the way, gives a single-person cloverleaf also, but I'm only going to discuss the double one here. And you're going to end in a starting double pass-through formation. I have them look at this. The next thing I do is try and draw a stem on the four-leaf clover here, just as something to let it soak into their mind what I'm talking about by a cloverleaf versus their body movements. And I have a feeling that this will probably help when they hear the term cloverleaf. They will picture a four-leaf clover and do the proper pattern. Unfortunately, there aren't many people that go out looking for four-leaf clovers anymore. They're looking for three-leaf clovers because that's all they trip over. When you say cloverleaf, they think about a highway interstate interchange, and my stem on the clover doesn't help very much at all on that. But again, that little trick, I think, just re-emphasizes in their mind what it is they're supposed to remember, and then proceed to have them walk through it. And again, notice I didn't say men, women, but the person on the left, the person on the right. The other thing that lends itself nicely to a diagram is a peel-off. And I have the person go through what the definition says. The person on the right will go away from the center, semicircle facing the opposite direction to be the end of a line that's forming. This one turns the other way. Trailers step up, do a U-turn back inside to stand in the center of a line that's forming. This does show a wider gap than we really want, but for pictorial reasons it sort of helps. And at this point I give them an idea of crudely trying to draw a banana here to show them this banana peel coming off to help it sink and register in their minds. And I think it helps. I proceed afterwards, get rid of the fruity part here, to show them that if these people can do their peel off, whether these are facing the same way or whether they're facing the other way, and proceed to show them about box circulate formations and Z's and the other kind of things that we'll do peel-offs from. But with a picture, it becomes a little easier for them to see, and somewhat with the right kind of fun, you can get them to relate to it better. Other calls that I use, not all calls work with this, but partner trade turns out to be pretty good to work with. wheel and deal to get the initial part of that concept seems to work reasonably well with this, both from lines facing out or two-face lines. It's got limited use. You can't use it for forward and back very effectively, but if you want. Anyway, the main thing we're talking about is know the definition, understand what it means, transmit that to your dancers in what way you can best do it. If the call is something that is fairly easy to do from a variety of formations and positions, such as forward and back. It doesn't matter whether you're half sashayed or not. It doesn't matter whether you're in a squared set and the heads are doing it or whether you got lines. By all means, use it in a variety of ways. If it's a call that's a lot more involved, spin chain through, for instance, and in your area it's not being done very often with he, she lines, don't proceed to waste time walking through that at this point until want to teach them further. But by all means, when you use the definition, don't eliminate the possibility of doing that. Still say ends, centers, left hands or right hands, whatever is appropriate. Don't say the two men will do this and the two women will do that, etc. Because when you eventually get on to expanding their abilities and their knowledge, once they've gotten more comfortable with the primary part, you don't want to have to go back and change what you've taught them. Make sure you use the definitions properly. Frank?
Hey, thank you, Don. Before we get Jerry up here to proceed with a couple or three basics off of the list, let me point out something that we found the last few years in some of our callers' colleges, caller schools. We started giving a little entrance test the first day of the school. As the people had arrived and we were sitting around getting acquainted, we would pass out a test with about 21 questions on it, which were predominantly things about definitions, really. There were some other technical aspects, but it was heavily weighted toward definitions. I really have become rather appalled at what I find out. And I'm not talking about the new caller. I'm not talking about the caller who is just arriving at caller school starting from point zero, who showed up knowing the words to two singing calls and says, teach me to call. That's easy. But it's the one who shows up has been calling 12 or 15 years, and when we hand these questions out, do you realize the average caller that has been taking those tests has been missing 16 to 17 of the questions out of 21. It's not a happy thought that those are the people out here in the field doing the teaching of our score dancers, and we wonder why that some of the people are not staying in our movement. I think it's because they're not being taught correctly, and they are never getting beyond a state of confusion, and there's nothing worse than being confused. So that's one of the reasons that we are really gung-ho today on we as callers understanding definitions as a tool to our trade. Jerry, would you get up here and kind of emphasize what I just said with some demonstrations on 2 or 3 of the basics?
Won't spend a lot of time on the tools that are available to us now, but I think it's worth mentioning because we have spent a little better than 6 years putting all of the programs together. 2 of the caller training manuals that are now available to us and follow CALLERLAB's approved definitions and timing. And this one, produced by American Square Dance Society, is an excellent manual. And I think if you haven't taken the time to look at it, you'll want to do that. It has everything you'll need to run your classes and all the definitions, the timing, the teaching hints, everything that you'll probably need to do your class. Here's another one, excellent manual put out by Square Tunes, and they have a definite teaching program laid out in there, and they're both CALLERLAB approved. And if you haven't looked at them, be sure you do, because they're both excellent manuals. These are just a couple of tools that we want to remind you of that will help you in your teaching. This list that has been out, and I'm sure that a lot of you have used it for years. You have made up some, run on up through some of the different levels of programs, square dance programs that we have. This one is, again, put out by Sets in Order. American Square Dance Society has for years been using this, And again, it's a great tool to keep track. Once you give those dancers and have read them the definition or taught them the definition of the call, you mark it when you started it, and you can keep track each time you review and go back over that basic, keeping track until you're satisfied they have accomplished what you wanted them to do with that basic. And these are just tools. If you haven't been using them, you might consider. They're very helpful. Made up some of my own that I use on the square dance program that I do in the valley during the winter, and these run on up through the different levels. Those are a few tools that are available to you and worthwhile looking into for sure. You notice the print's a little larger on these. Now that I'm a grandpa, I need that. I'd like to first of all read these are acceptable now too that I'm a grandpa, right? I have a new one. That's my first one, so it's quite an experience for us. We've been having a lot of fun. They were down with us in the valley for the last 2 weeks, and I spoiled him about as good as anybody could in 2 weeks, I think. I sent him home. Anyway, we're having fun. Okay, first of all, we're going to read the definition as CALLERLAB has approved it for the basic scoot back. Dancers facing in step straight forward to join adjacent forearms. Turn half, 180 degrees, and step forward to end in the position vacated by the dancers who are facing out. Meanwhile, each dancer facing out runs into the position vacated by the dancer who's doing the forearm turn. When done from right hand boxes, the dancers facing in turn by the right, and those dancers facing out run right. When done from left hand boxes, the dancers facing in turn by the left, and the dancers facing out run left. Now, that doesn't require that you say do a left scoot back, does it, by the definition? And those are things that are coming up into some of the committee work ahead of us now, determining whether that's a helpful hint. And I'm sure that probably most of us do that anyway. If we have them into a left-hand way, we wouldn't probably say scoot back and then watch the confusion. We'd say think left, or you're going to use a left, do a scoot back. You'll give them some hint to it. So it's in the process of now whether we want to add that to the definition to say do a left scoot back, do a left swing through, do a left spin the top, those sorts of things. Anyway, going back to that basic then, scoot back, what I have seen, and I'm sure that you have seen, and probably the most common usage to start to teach a scoot back is from a box for touch a quarter, boys looking in, girls looking out, for ease of teaching. I am opposed to that teaching position, even though it seems easier for us, and I think you'll agree with me that probably at least 50% of the places that you go to call a mainstream dance, you hesitate when you have a normal ocean wave, he, she to call scoot back. You know the end result, usually. It's confusion because they're not used to that positioning. And that's normal positioning. The touch a quarter with alternating couples. I said he, she a little bit ago. It should have been he, she, he. Ocean waves. Boys on the ends, girls in the middle. Now, if you start your teach from there, and they don't get it from the boys looking in, girls looking out position, they'll be trained to do a scoot back. That will be the easiest one for them, naturally. But another mistake that we find and we see all the time is that in our help, we'll even say to them, scoot back, boys, or girls scoot back. And that's not a scoot back at all. You're not even directing it right when you tell them that. You're actually, the boys aren't doing a scoot back. the girls aren't doing the scoot back. They're doing part of it. There are two parts, a facing in part and a facing out part. If you help and try to direct them by saying, boys scoot back, you're only telling the boys to do the forearm turn part. The girls, you haven't told them to do anything. In other words, you're assuming they're going to take their part and do it on their own. But the dancers get used to that. They get used to that hearing that sort of thing. And pretty soon we're into a normal ocean wave. We say scoot back, and they can't do it. They're looking for another guy. Now, I've seen this happen, and I'm sure you have too. They'll be looking in like this, and you say scoot back, and there's a girl over there. They'll look over there, and I say, there he is. And they'll turn and walk over, and those two guys will do the turn. Now, that's frightening. But it happens, and it happens more often than we like to admit, probably. Those are the things that we have to watch when we're presenting scoot back. Those are things that we think maybe if you start, or I maybe should rephrase that. I think you should start from normal ocean waves and let the facing in people step forward, join a forearm, and continue with their 180-degree turn. I use a lot of walls when I'm teaching scoot back. For instance, before we start, I have those people who are looking in. Look at the wall ahead of them, look at the one behind you. When you finish the call, you'll be facing the wall behind you. And I want you to look at the person across the set, and those little teaching hints to them before they ever take off their pads from their landing or starting pads. I want them to look at who they're going to be doing the arm turn with in the middle. Now, it's a little easier for people to understand, if they're well trained up to that point, what turn-throughs are. You can sometimes... People will relate to that part of scoot back. If they're looking in, you say those people who are looking in are going to do a turn through action. Or you may say to them, those people who are facing in walk straight forward, join right arms from a normal ocean wave, and then you're going to trade with each other. Now, if they're well versed on trades, they should know by then that they're going to be turning to face the wall behind them, and then finish by walking forward or back out. I also use little hints to them that this call, maybe you can relate to it a little bit easier by saying the name of the call is scoot back. We scoot them in, we scoot them back. And remember that you return to the wave you started in. Sometimes you'll see them do walk and dodge from that. And so little things like that will catch 2 or 3 here. The next little hint that you give them catches another 3 or 4 over here, and so forth. And the final result and what we're looking for, of course, is success in being able to say scoot back to them, and they do the call, and they do it properly, and they end up in the position that they're supposed to be in, and the next call will then work for them. If you take the scoot back in parts, you can use it, like I mentioned a little while ago, boy scoot back. If you were in, for instance, a two-face line, we can get a square if you would like to see a little bit of what we're talking about. Did we have anybody designated to start with? Okay, we can probably get some volunteers real quick. We'll do just some quick demonstrations on the do's and don'ts maybe that we're talking about, and we're going to need a square. Watch the edges. Okay, very good. We'll use you guys as heads, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's have the heads pair off, step forward, turn and face your corner, make an ocean wave. Now from here, let's do a swing through. I want to get into what I just about was ready to tell you a little bit ago. Boys run. Now, if we said girls scoot back from here, you see, we're legal because the girls are actually going to do a scoot back. The two facing out are going to do their part of scoot back. The two who are looking in are going to do their part of scoot back. So from there, we don't have a problem with identifying somebody such as girls to do the scoot back. We can also say centers scoot back, which is give it to them one way then start using it, so that when you have a mixed two-face line, you don't have to say, well, I can't do a scoot back from there because I can't tell the boys or the girls to do it. But for teaching purposes, you may say, girls, scoot back, do that for me. And they can understand, and there's no conflict because the girls are doing their parts of scoot back. Boys are remaining in place. Let's do a tag the line one time. If you want to take them a little further, you can face right. And then you may work the boys or the centers from here and say, boys, scoot back, go. Now, generally, you'll want to do that twice so that they both get the feel of each part of scoot back from there. So you would again have them centers, scoot back. That's the boys. You might say that. You might say centers, scoot back, or boys, and that's the boys, or some other little hint to them so that they don't look around thinking a girl should be involved. Okay, let's do a bend the line. Touch a quarter. Boy, run. That's getting a little close to the edge over there. And do you feel nervous, Frank? Do you feel like I'm taking to the edge? Okay. So those are teaching processes that we use in Scoot Back that we have found to be very effective for us, so that when we're in this kind of an ocean wave, step to an ocean wave, and we say scoot back to our dancers, they don't turn down the line and two boys look at each other and run down there and turn to with each other and come back. They'll move forward in a straight line forward and complete the call. And if they're trained from this position, I feel that their success rate is going to be a lot better than if you start it from boys looking in, girls facing out, or vice versa. Frank.
Just to continue on what you started a moment ago about the centers, this adds another degree of difficulty here, actually, if you have the centers scoot back from waves rather than two-faced lines, because it causes the ends to do a little more thinking, I think.
Yes, and then you might also prompt them or help. If we said centers scoot back or ladies only scoot back, you would probably want to say think left, or girls do a left scoot back. That gives them a much better chance at it. And that's, of course, what we're looking for anyway, is success with each of the positions we do put them through. When we do move from position to position, we do find a lot of times for teaching purposes that it's a little easier, or a lot easier, for us to have people in a familiar position, for at least half of your people to be in a familiar position, rather than all four half-sashayed and in an unfamiliar position. Those things you want to watch for sure. We'll show you what we mean in that as we go into the next. Are there any questions? Frank has something he wants to add.
Hinges. Well, no, leave us right here. The thing I like to emphasize too is that when you hear the command, girls scoot back from this formation, there's a message there for the men. And that's something that I emphasize to my dancers in getting them to learn definitions, that when they hear the command, girls scoot back, there's a definite message there for the men. That message is, you're not involved. Don't do a thing. Do a single hinge. Darrell Clendenin wrote a real nice singing call a few years back, in which he had us in a formation where the boys are facing in, the girls are facing out, and he said, boys, scoot back. Now, the way many of us call scoot back, and we might as well confess, fellas, I've heard you, so don't sit there and deny it. You'll say boys scoot back, and you'll mean the boys go in and the girls do the running into the vacated spot. Darrell didn't. He was sharper than that. He had a message for the girls. What was that message? Don't do it. But he had to have another command ready for them, didn't he? Because they're standing in a spot that man's going to want in about 6 beats. He's going to want to be back out there joining that wave, and he's going to need that spot. So there had to be something for the girls to do. But Darrell solved it this way. He said, just the boys scoot back. Do it. And the girls do a partner trade. And everybody swing the one you meet, or something of that sort. And it worked real good. It was interesting choreography. But he did not violate the definition. And when he said, boys, scoot back, he had a definite message in mind for the girls. And I like that.
Okay. We'll move on into another one of our basics that I think it's the last one, number 68, recycle. Let's have once again the head couple step forward, turn and face your corner, make an ocean wave. And how many times when we do recycle have you seen the dancers, and they get it somewhere? And unfortunately, I have also witnessed being taught where the girls turn back and a wheel and deal. We don't need 4 for this particular call. Just go ahead and relax for a minute. This brings to mind something else that I like to use as a teaching method, and that's a lot of two-couple teaches, where we have two-couple movements, so that my dancers start to understand. When I talk to them about a movement being a two-couple movement, they understand that it's going to be them and one other couple that's involved with that movement from the time it starts until the time it finishes, and the other 2 couples are not involved whatsoever with that particular call. And when we start into the basic mainstream program, most of them are 2-couple movements. I mean, the biggest part of them. So it's a good idea to start them early on that, in that thinking. So when you come to a call and say, here's another 2-couple movement, bang, they know there's a lot of information that you're telling them with only those lines. There's a lot of information that they've already can absorb. Now, back to the recycle. The definition reads as follows. Yeah. I lost them. Here they are. The ends of the wave cross-fold as the centers of the wave fold behind and the ends and follow them around. Then face in to end as 2 facing couples. Let me read that again. The ends of the wave cross-fold as the centers of the wave fold in behind the ends and follow them around. Then face in to end as 2 facing couples. Okay, definition, as we have accepted it in CALLERLAB. Now, you know there are so many other varieties and teaches of recycle that it almost becomes a different movement. Frank, show them the cross hand pull around that you were demonstrating a little while ago. He's seen. Changes hands, reaches around, and brings the girl. Now, that's fairly common. That's not an uncommon move. You've seen that. Another one is to push that girl's hand, and then you step forward and take the other hand and start wheeling and dealing to face that couple. Now, there are lots of varieties in ways that you've seen recycle done. Very seldom do you ever see the 3 F's used in recycle.
How many of you use the 3 F's as a teaching device in teaching recycle? Those who don't have your hands up, listen to the next few minutes. Jerry's going to put a word of wisdom in your ears that's worth the whole trip to Chicago.
Well, we've used this system for many years, and the dancers get a hold of it very quickly. They can remember 3 F's. And we start by having the ends of the ocean wave. And a lot of times we'll just have them release the hand, and we say, we're going to be doing a cross-fold action. So I want you to walk forward and cross behind the dancer beside you and fold in front of the far center. And we take them over there, let them look at them, and then we say, okay, we want you back. You can do an unrecycle or an uncross fold and bring them back to their starting position. We also emphasize to the centers then that you're going to be folding forward and in behind the end dancer. The end is always going to lead us. The centers are always going to follow. But you're both doing a folding action. As the end makes his turn to start forward for his cross fold, just start that action for me, ends. The centers fold in behind them and stop into a single file action. Go ahead, boys, make your turn down the line, just briefly, okay? Now, as you move forward, this is the second part of the next F. It's the fold to start the action. The follow puts you side by side with the oncoming dancers, and then immediately you turn and face and join hands. Now there's a no hands, it's a no hands movement. There are no hands in recycle, which we all probably remember. It leaves everything free for the next call. It's much more comfortable. They can dance at DBD much faster by training them in the 3F method. Now do this for me. Let's make we have a left-handed ocean wave. The girls are now the ends, and you might mention that fact to them, but what is more important is that the ends are going to be doing a cross fold. They're going to cross behind the dancer beside them and fold in front of the far center. Centers, and you have already told, wait a minute, not you, okay, you want to experience that, honey? Go ahead. Go ahead, ends, you cross and fold, and you walk right over there and look at them, eyeball to eyeball. Now that's the first F for those ends. They have started their cross-fold action. The centers, we've already mentioned to them that they're going to be the followers. The ends are our leaders. The centers are always going to follow. And just as the end starts to move forward, and those ends can also help the centers a little bit by giving them a little pull instead of a shove, saying, follow me. You might give them that little tug, which reminds them they're the followers. Okay? So, as the centers fold in to follow, do that for me. You get single file again, and you move forward, 1, 2, and face. And it ends the call again. Now you can take that 4 boys, 4 girls, right-handed, left-handed, inside out, upside down, in a very short period of time by telling the dancers or telling those people when you start your recycle, make an ocean wave. And we're going to say to them now, we're into recycle a little bit, and we're going to say to them, we're going to do, now you're going to recycle. Remember, fold, follow, face. Do it. Recycle. Fold, follow, face. And I have them actually say it. Actually have them repeat it and say, fold, follow, face. Make an ocean wave. And I'll say, swing through. And by then we'll probably have been through a couple of the easier positions with maybe the 4 boys during recycle, 4 girls during recycle, before you ever get to half sashayed, where this is an unfamiliar for all 4 of them. Where when you have an ocean wave with 4 boys, an ocean wave with 4 girls, you have 2 in the norm, 2 in the abnormal position. So you've always got a little steadier hand from there. Then you progress to the half sashayed, and it becomes a much easier call. And you might remind them again, ends you're going to lead, centers you're going to follow. Ready? Do a recycle. Fold, follow, face, and it becomes a much easier movement for dancers to get onto. And it also eliminates a lot of things we don't like to see about recycle. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Jerry said it, but I'm afraid he might have said it so casually that you might have let it slip by. And that was the little thing about the leading. I think that was great. Many of us teach leading. Many of us are into round dancing, realize that in round dancing you lead, and if you lead in round dancing, you lead in square dancing, and that doesn't mean push or pull. That means indicate, just with a slight indication of which way I want you to go. In the case of recycle, the ends are really the leaders, and they are telling those centers, follow me. I've seen some fellows who are into teaching people to lead who make this mistake. Barb, can I borrow you a minute, huh? Can you visualize that Barb is the center and the rest of this ocean wave is over there toward you? I'm the end. In trying to lead, be sure you don't tell the dancer or the end dancer to give a little push. Because if he does give a little indication of turn to that girl, he's assured one thing. There's no way she can recycle. Because I've made it impossible for her to get in behind me for the fold and the follow. So, years and years ago, I saw it happen with Walk All Around Your Corner down in Texas. Somebody went to Colorado and learned how to walk all around the corner, and they came back home and they thought, oh, how'd that thing go? And they taught it left shoulder because they didn't quite remember. And you want to see the darndest mess? It took about 15 years to straighten all that out. Those of you who lived through it know what I meant. So if we can solve that this afternoon, with, for goodness sakes, if you're teaching the lead, be sure it's a lead to indicate, come on, get in behind me and follow me. All righty. Stay right up here. Don't go away. We'll just use you all, too. How about a nice hand for Jerry for those two presentations? Real nice. I kind of got a hint that this morning there may have been some spinning the tops going on over here in this room. Did we spin a top or two over here? Could I get 4 dancers in an ocean wave?
Frank? Lucky Shotwell from Michigan. I happened to notice that this morning we were talking about model squares, and we were just remarking here there was a little discrepancy in the handhold up there on the ocean wave from up there where you guys with the model square.
What was the discrepancy?
Thumb grabbing.
Oh, I didn't see any thumb grabbing. Well, I didn't see a bit of thumb grabbing. The thumbs were alongside of the hand. Every girl that I came to, was somebody grabbing a thumb? Huh? Well, Jack Murtha was in here this morning, and I've argued at lunch about that with Jack. If you attend his next session, you'll learn that actually you do take a hold of hands. You do not grab thumbs, though. He is absolutely correct. You don't grab thumbs. The only time I ever put a thumb behind the hand is if somebody does what he does. If you walk up and lay hands there, I put a thumb behind there because I want to have a hold of something. This gives me the feeling that she thinks I've got leprosy, which I really do, but I didn't want everybody to know. So that's not in print anywhere in that manual. However, neither is this, because Jack and I argued it out. We went through at lunch and searched the manuals. Melton's styling session does not say. But I've worked with enough fellows that I think you grip hands, but you do not lock thumbs. Jack's correct on that. Don't lock thumbs. It makes it hard to get away. But there may have been some thumb grab, but I don't know. None of the girls that I came to in any time took thumbs. Yeah, I take a hold of a hand, but I keep that thumb alongside so there won't be any thumb grabbing. Okay, excuse me for, huh? The rest of them are all just doing this, huh? By God, you do have leprosy. That's bad. All righty. Could I get a 4-hand ocean wave, and preferably right-hand wave with the ladies in the center and the men on the ends? I just need 4 dancers to demonstrate this. No, just a right-hand ocean wave. The rest of you can kind of sit down and relax a minute. We won't use you for a second. If this team doesn't do well, we may replace them. We are teaching it and we are dancing by definition, and it comes time to spin the top. And so tonight we're going to teach you to spin the top in this class. And we say, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to teach you to spin the top from this right-handed ocean wave here. You turn half with the right. Go ahead and do that. Centers turn left 3/4, and the ends move up and make another wave. Isn't that the way we teach spin the top? Golly, I hope not. How come I didn't hear a loud boo hiss? That's not the way you do it. Now, I'm going to make you a bet. There's no way I can prove it, so there's no you want to pay off. But I'll bet you if I'd have walked in this room with a piece of paper with a test question on it that says, how do you spin the top? 50% of the answers would have been just what I said. And it's incorrect as can be. It's incorrect as can be. The definition does not mention right hands at any time. Definition does not mention left hands at any time. Definition does not mention right-hand ocean waves, except to say that if it starts from facing couples, you step into a right-hand ocean wave. It does not mention left-hand ocean waves. It just says that it starts from any 4-hand ocean wave, 4-dancer wave. And the end turns the adjacent center half. Let's do that. The new centers touch hands and turn 3/4, while the ends move up 1/4. If you stop before you get there, that would be called a nice swing through. Now, if we teach it that way, my contention is that if the dancer learns those words, or that way of doing things, end turning centers and new centers turning 3/4 and ends moving up, you're not going to have to waste a lot of time talking about right hands and left hands and women and men and boys and girls, because they know that every time that they're in a 4-hand ocean wave, they can do a spin the top. That's the reason I love to teach by definition, because it shortens my teaching time. To me, it shortens my teaching time. Okay, we said beforehand we analyze calls before we start to teach them. Anybody analyze anything about spin the top? It took an ocean wave and turned that sucker 90 degrees, didn't it? By golly, if it was this way, it ended up this way. That's an interesting little concept. That's something interesting to know. Especially if you're going to one of Bill Peters' collar school, he goes talk to you about formation management. You better be able to manage that formation into that perpendicular wave. perpendicular to the starting position of that wave. That's important that you know what's going to happen when you say spin the top. Did you notice something else about a spin the top? You always only touch that one person's hand, don't you? This poor guy never gets to touch that other lady. Every time they pass, he just says bye-bye, because they never get a chance, because you always touch one person's hand. So when you're teaching that to dancers, I think that's important to know. But you're only going to have to look for that one person. If you haven't found them yet, you obviously haven't done a spin the top. Let's spin the top again. Ends, turn, centers, half, new centers, three-quarters, ends, move up. So you wave bye-bye to that one and go back to the one you're supposed to touch. And that's interesting, I think, about spin the top. I think that's a very interesting thing.
What happens, I think, what Frank mentioned a little while ago, and which he just did with his direction, is the way the call is being taught. In his direction, he said, turn half, centers, three-quarter, ends, move up. Now stay here. Now that's direction. That's directional calling, and that's what he was doing there. And we're finding, as we talk to callers and as we watch them teach, that they're teaching the definition of something they're really only using as directional calling. And that's the definition they're using. They're using it just like they're directing the call rather than the actual definition. So guard against that. It's fine to directionalize, and that's what causes success for your dancers. But don't use it as your teaching definition.
I thought I said spin the top and then went ahead and said that. But if I didn't, Jerry is sure correct. Don't start leaving out the name of the term, because that's the whole key. We're trying to teach them how to do spin the top. They want to hear that word. They want to learn to react to that word. Did I? Oh, I said it. And then went ahead and directionalized it. Okay. Can you see what we've got? Let's do this. Move this motion wave so that it's parallel to the front of the stage. Can we spin the top from this wave? I heard a couple of yeahs and a couple of no's. We got to agree, can we or not? We can, right? Are you ready for this? I got one man that votes we don't do it from here. How are you going to have the end turn the adjacent center half without just taking that man and splitting him down the middle? There's no such thing. The definition of spin the top is what? Ends turn the adjacent center half. There's no variation. There's no place to vote. We're not running a democracy. We're running a square dance class. And the rules have already been set and established for us before we got here. And the rule is the end turn the adjacent center half, and there's no such term as left spin the top or right spin the top anyway. Why don't you walk up to a microphone, because we set the ground rules and we're disobeying them. Yes. Can we, while she's coming up there, can we swing through from here?
Yes.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Can't you use a center man, or he's the head man, start a spin the top and finish with the other man?
Not by definition. Not by definition. I'm not going to take gimmicks away from you. If you want to call that, fine. It's a gimmick, and what are you doing? You're doing the very thing Jerry said. Why did you want to use the word spin the top anyway? Head man and the girl you've got swing half by the right. I assume the middle man's the head man. That girl and the new man swing three-quarter while the other man move up a quarter. That's fine. That's not a spin the top, but there's nothing wrong with that particular bit of choreography. It's great. There's only one problem. It's not a spin the top.
Add a phantom and spin the top then.
There's no phantoms in mainstream, basic,
mainstream.
Plus, advanced A1 or A2. Any other questions? Yeah, one more.
Jeff Seidel, Australia. If you continue reading on your definitions, you'll find there's a formation set up there as well, and I think that's important that we look at our formations, our starting and finishing.
Starting formations.
Yeah.
Very good. There are. We haven't had the question come up here, though. Can you get my fourth dancer back in here and just kind of couple up and face each other as couples, would you please? Can we spin the top from here? Yes, because there's a rule written in the preface of our mainstream definitions, and what's that rule called? There's a rule. What's the name of the rule? The name of the rule is the facing couples rule. It's right there in the preface to your definitions, gang. It's one of the things you want to study. It's one of the things your dancer should be made aware of. What does that rule say? It says I'm trying to do this from memory, some figures that are done from ocean waves may be called from facing couples, and when done so, the dancers step immediately into a right-hand ocean wave to do the figure unless the caller otherwise directs. Now from here, if I want to do a left spin the top, today there's no legal way to do it without saying left touch to a wave and then spin the top. If Jack Lassery's committee that's working on this very product should come forth with the fact that we can call left spin the tops from here, that may solve part of that problem. But right now, if we call spin the top, part of the definition is step to a right-hand wave before you start. Notice the first word of the facing couples rule. If you look it up in your book, you'll notice the first word is what? Some. Some figures that are done from ocean waves may be called. The reason that word some is there, because Jerry had us doing one a moment ago that's always done from ocean waves, could not be called from here. That's recycle. You cannot recycle until you get to the advanced list. And then you will probably be kind like I am and say facing couples recycle just to make friends with the dancers. But at the mainstream and plus level, you cannot call recycle from this particular formation. They must be in an ocean wave. We cannot call single hinge from this formation. It's a touch a quarter, and yet I hear callers calling it every day. They'll have you coming down towards somebody and say single hinge with that person. That's not a single hinge, it's a touch a quarter. More often than not, though, I see the converse of that. I see them in ocean waves and hear the call touch a quarter. That's the mistake that's most commonly made there. But it goes right back to knowing your definitions, knowing the starting formations. Okay, we've covered spin the... Well, let's do this. Dixie style to a wave. Can we spin the top from here? Yes. Sure, I sure hope so. Which hand would it start with? Left hand. That's great. If we do this for our dancers, for our students in our classes, do we ever go back and prove that we were right by calling it in our choreography to them? Or is it something we teach them the night that came up in the lessons and then they never hear it again? Don't lie about it. Don't lie about it. You taught it to them right, didn't you? You taught it to them right. And you haven't called it to them for 6 months. And they've forgotten it. They have forgotten it. Can we do a swing through from this wave? What hand's it going to start with? Always. It's always going to start with the right hand. We don't care where that right hand is. It's going to start with the right hand. Yeah, there is a left swing through. It's already taken care of in the list. And left swing through means exactly what it says. It's a swing through starting with the left hand. But the definition of swing through is what? Those who can turn half of the right, then those who can turn half of the left. That's just that simple. Okay, let's see what other problems we can get into from... Do I? Question? Excuse me? Question?
Randy Tans, Waukesha, Wisconsin. I'm sure everybody will agree with me in this room. Not every dancer that walks on my floor did I teach. And so if I call something like that would put you in let's say a left spin the top, which starts with the left hand, if they didn't learn from me, they probably don't know what the heck it is. So you have to be a little careful.
Darn right you do, because you're trying to make friends, aren't you? I think Jerry said it a while ago. We're all striving for, what? Dancer success.
So that may be the reason that some of these things aren't getting used, because the other callers that are teaching in your area, that the dancers come to your dance, you better be careful what you call to them.
But couldn't you, this group had never heard it before, couldn't you say, watch it, it's a lefty, or what was some of the other words you said? It's going to be left-handed, or ready with the left, to caution them? I'll bet you could do it. Plus the fact that I use this little theory in our caller schools, I get the very question, it's usually worded a little more directly than what you've just said. They'll come up and they'll say, but Frank, if I call that to my group at home next week when I go home, it would lose the floor. And my answer is always this, you're darn right it would. But if you do it next week and then show them why it lost the floor, and then the following week you come back and you help them again. Probably walk it one time, or at least caution them verbally before you call it, before the tip starts, that we're going to be doing that spin the top tonight, gang, with that left hand, so watch it. By the third week, all of a sudden they can do it without being warned, without being helped. I'm talking about your own class, not the visitors that drop in. You're certainly correct on those. But we're constantly striving to give our own dancers in our own clubs variety, different experiences, things that feel good. But the point's well taken. When you're calling to a floor, you didn't teach all those dancers, did you? In fact, come along with me for a week. I call every night the ones that I never taught any of them, so that's even worse yet.
I also find that when a national caller comes into the area, he's going to do a dance, he's real hesitant to use those types of figures, too, for the same reason. If you were coming into our town, would you call, spin a top from a left-hand wave? And how many times?
I probably would, but I'm dumb, and I'm noted for being dumb. The thing I'd probably do first, though, would probably be this. I'd ask these men where their right hand was. I'd say, men, where's your right hand? Let's swing through. And chain down the line after you finished your swing through, of course. They had to stop and vote there for a minute. They weren't real sure. But not only that falls within mainstream plus quarterlies. That's a mainstream quarterly figure right there. That's not C1, but it's certainly interesting. Let's do one other thing, and for this I'll need the entire square again. Can I get a square? There's one figure, and this is up on the plus list, that's being so misused lately that it's become a pet peeve with me, and I would like very much to at least expose you to my thoughts on it this afternoon, and that is this. Heads, still same heads, pass through, go around one, squeeze into a line, touch a quarter. We had a figure on the plus list here a while back called track and anything. It's going to be dropped, and so we're not interested in that figure, but I'm interested in something that occurred in that figure, because it's occurred in a couple of others over the last 2 or 3 years, and CALLERLAB is making this mistake, and I haven't seemed to convince anybody, at least of all the office, about it, but that is the fact that we're misusing the word extend. What does the word extend mean? Everybody move forward. Is that what it means? Advance one position. Anybody else got an idea? We're all missing the point. Does anybody remember what extend really was, what the full term is called? Extend the tag, and it means exactly that. It means the indicated dancers step forward to the next tag position. And it cannot mean anything else. In the figure that was on the quarterlies at the plus level was called track and anything, it told the girls to do the outside part of a track. Well, let's do a triple scoot first, just so I can make it easier for you, because the boys are used to doing the outside part of a track too, and I'm sure I won't lose any of them this time. Okay, boys, go ahead and do your outside part of a track too. The definition as it was appeared in print said the girls extend. Do the girls extend? Girls extend. That was an extend. Do you see that? Right here was an extend. They went to a quarter tag position. What you really wanted them to do was extend twice, or double extend. Let us be more careful with our definitions. If we really mean double extend or extend twice, let's say so.
I'd like to take a slight exception to that.
Would you?
I agree fully on the extend and understanding the definition. But when the quarterly selection ballot came out, it did say extend. When it finally came out in print as a quarterly selection, it did say the trailing to circulate once. I saw to that.
Thank you, Don. If enough of us call the office, I called the office, but I didn't know how it finally came out, because I know I called the office when the ballot came out and I voted. I read it and I was afraid to look back at it, I guess. Let's do this. I see other figures that are written. For instance, I see people teaching Ferris wheel this way. They'll say the couples facing out are going to do their part of a wheel and deal. Would you do that, please? They will also turn and say the same thing. They'll say the in-facing couples are going to extend. Are they extending? No, they're not extending. They're doing a half circulate. Because extend, let's reserve extend for when we really mean something to do with the tag position. Let's do this. Centers do a half circulate, and you wheel and deal, and of course the figure was called Ferris wheel. Let's do this. Step into a wave in the center. What's this formation called? It's a quarter tag formation. This is important in understanding definitions, that we understand formations. They all go together, don't they? If we extend from a quarter tag, where do we end up? Go ahead and extend. That is extend. What formation are we in? We're in a half tag, or two parallel waves. If we extend from there, where will we be? Do an extend. We're in what's called a three-quarter tag, which is an ocean wave between two out-facing pairs of dancers. If we extend from here, where will we be? We will be in a completed tag position or a completed double pass-through formation. And those are the things that I hope that we can encourage you to go back and read those definitions and really understand them enough that when you teach your next fall's beginners class, you won't lie to them one time. And when we come by your town and try to call a dance to them, and we say, watch it, it's going to be a lefty, do a spin the top, that they'll fly right through that thing and they'll say, hot dog, that was fun. We thank you for spending the last hour and a half with us. I don't know where time goes when you're having fun. Thank you for coming. How about